Hey, folks, welcome to the Cosmic Car Wash podcast again. I'm Paul Daly. This is my good friend, Rick Kaiser.
Hello, everybody.
Yes, hello. We are very excited about this today. It's been a couple weeks since we've recorded, and I think we're kind of getting into this every other week routine, but, we'll get through the holidays and settle into the routine of the new year, and
Right.
it's all right. And I guess it's not so much the frequency with which we record. It's that what we say matters and is thought out and is words of life. Because, Rick, I know you agree. This is a podcast about the kingdom of God. And
Right.
it's not just two guys getting on here spouting our opinions. I mean, these are our opinions, but we're really trying to say something that will bring life to people and
Right.
that will make them say, maybe God's not the angry, surly curmudgeon that I always thought he was. Maybe he really does love me and wants a relationship with me. And yeah, if that's what people take away from this and people find Jesus, then we have done our jobs, and that's a good life.
Yeah, it took me a long time to learn that. And I don't know if learning is the right description. It became a revelation.
Yeah.
It's one of those clicks that can't be unclicked, you know, and once it does, you can't see anything else but that. And then you begin to see, it's like buying a new blue car, and then all of a sudden you see that blue car everywhere. So, since that has happened, it's like every time I turn the page in the Bible, I just see it again and again, over and over. And it's a beautiful thing. It's very, very encouraging. And it's such an easier way to live and such an easier way to serve in the kingdom and serve the Lord. And
yes.
And it makes change easier too. I know that's been my experience, and just even the way I look at people. And I know you and I've talked over and over again about, we were, hunkered down with our Bibles, our ammo, and waiting for whatever. I mean,
Right.
we weren't
our
waiting
perishable food and
right. Yeah. Our jerky, our beef jerky, and freeze dried eggs.
Yeah.
So, So that's not the case.
That's not the case. And I'm careful. I'm being progressively more careful when I talk about how we found the message of the Great Renewal, because I don't want it to come across as like we have studied and learned, and by virtue of our, anything that we have, gotten some higher level of revelation. That's not it at all. Like, the way this happened for me is, it looked at first like I stumbled across the John Eldredge podcast that started this for us, but looking back on it, man, that was a divine, God-timed moment. As I was looking through my podcast feed, God said, "Stop there." And I listened, and I haven't stopped listening since. And it's the grace of God that saved us.
Yeah, I think I've listened to that at least 20 times.
Yeah.
And it's funny is that every time I listen to it, I hear something new.
Yes.
Yeah, and you can't walk away from that unchanged.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Which, anybody that maybe is not sure what we're talking about, if you go to the search bar in YouTube and look for the Wild at Heart podcasts from September and the first episode in October of 2020. It's a 5-part series. The first episode is Time to Get Honest About Our Ambivalence. And then it goes from there to talk about what really is the message of the whole Bible. The true gospel is Jesus didn't just die to save us from our sins. He did that, but there's so much more to the story. Jesus is coming back, and he has always been about restoring us to the Garden of Eden and rejoining heaven and earth. And it's good news.
That's great news.
Yes.
That is the news.
It is the news. I love what John Eldredge says. The story of God has been, is now, and always will be the story of the world.
That's good.
Yeah. So, anyway, This is not the closing. This is the opening. And as you probably have seen when you clicked on this, first of all, thank you for clicking on this. Hopefully we're saying something that lands with you. But we're calling this The Paradise King Part 1, maybe? Maybe
Yeah.
there'll be a Part 2.
Okay.
But listening to the John Eldredge podcast a couple months ago, came to find out that one of his sons, Blaine Eldredge, had written and has since released his first book called The Paradise King. And yes, The Paradise King.
Mine's backwards.
I cannot, and I know I speak for you again, cannot stress strongly enough that this should be required reading for every single Christian. It's my impression of it is it's an incredibly well-researched book that's like a combination of J.R.R. Tolkien and Blaine's ability to tell a story and craft a word picture, but also it's scholarly research that dives into the history and the context and the cultures and the languages and the nuances of things that you just don't read.
We take for granted.
Yeah, we take for granted. And it really rounds out, it's not a replacement for the Bible by any means, but it rounds out the stories that we read in the Bible and helps, so far at least it's what it's doing for me, the stories of Adam and Abraham and Noah, or not Noah, Moses, and now I'm into King David, helps me understand how they were, why they were, what was going on, in some of these famous stories about their lives that we read in the Bible. It's just really, really a fantastic book on every single level.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It is stunning.
Yeah.
Absolutely stunning, breathtaking. I started reading it. I'm just getting through Abraham, not as far as you are, because I have to read a little bit and then just kind of sit back. And there is a rawness. I realized, I told Janet the other day, I said, for as many years as I've been reading the Bible, I started reading Blaine's book, The Paradise King, and realized that I feel like I've never read the Bible.
Yeah.
And I start to see, gosh, if I could articulate this the way that needs to be, is that I feel like that I've almost trivialized the Bible to where it's almost become a storybook, and the characters in it are, these happy-go-lucky storybook characters. Although, I mean, I do, not to diminish by any means, I believe it to be real and true, but I never understood the depth and the rawness, and the brutality and the what's another word I'm looking for, is just the the ferocity of some of these characters and their lives and the and the world around them and what they were going through. And these were people to not be trifled with. You did not trifle with them, and it's terrifyingly beautiful.
Yeah,
and you realize,
I think for me, it's the difference between watching a movie in 2D and then you go into a movie with the 3D glasses, and it's such a more immersive experience.
There you go. That's what I was trying to say. It's very
I'm
immersive.
for you, man.
It's I love it. I just really do, and I imagine it's gonna be one of those books that I'm gonna read more than a couple times.
Agreed.
You're right. I think that every should be required for reading. And I'm sure Blaine would really appreciate that if it were. He would sell 1 billion of them.
It's available on Amazon, and I think that's where he's selling it from right now. But I think a kind of a good way to dive into this, and the way you and I have kind of envisioned this episode going, Rick, is just to take some of the things that we've underlined in the book as far as we've read it, and maybe we deep dive into one thing, maybe we hit some of the highlights, but just really some of the things that landed for us personally, and hopefully that'll be enough to encourage others that may be listening to this to go get their own copy and see what kind of really cool adventures they can uncover. But to get started, I think I'd like to read just from the back of the book his summary of it. So it says, Night raids, necromancers, witch kings, and prophets. The Bible is a piercing drama, a tale of prophets and wandering spirits, heroic mothers and flashing swords, cosmic mountains and dry, shadowy Sheol. It is a true story that defines the nature and purpose of reality, and its claims are astonishing. But few modern readers experience the Bible that way. In
True.
this groundbreaking book, celebrated storyteller Blaine Eldridge draws upon years of research to illuminate the story of the Bible through the lives of 6 kingly characters. From Adam to Jesus, Eldridge combines thrilling retellings of famous stories with cutting-edge scholarship and robust theology to explore topics such as the Bible's picture of evil, its sophisticated supernatural worldview, and its complex picture of the human condition. And we should say, too, that the subtitle of the book, The Paradise King, is The Tragic History and Spectacular Future of Everything According to Jesus of Nazareth. So that's the whole book culminates with Jesus, the Paradise King. So
yeah. I think we should probably, as a side note, is that we are not paid sponsors at
not
all.
even, Blaine
Just
doesn't even know we exist.
Exactly. Just big fans. That's
Yeah.
all. Huge fans.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That being said, if somebody knows Blaine and wants to put him in contact with us, we
Let's
would
just
love
say
to.
Blaine could run over us in the grocery store parking lot and would not know who we were.
True story. True story. That's funny.
Hopefully he doesn't. So,
So, yeah. Why don't you, Rick? Why don't you kick it off? Like, starting from Adam. Are there any particular parts that really stood out to you as strikingly beautiful, or really helped you kind of come to a new appreciation of very brief story of Adam?
Yeah, actually, you and I were talking about this before we got started, but it's when God came walking through the ruach, the cool of the day, the wind, and they had hidden themselves and they were wearing their itchy fig leaves, and then he clothed them with the skin of an animal, and for the longest time I assumed, and you and I have talked about it, that it was that bloody lamb skin. We were convinced it was a lamb, and it's that language and the depth of study that brings a whole new life and dimension to the Bible, and it really is a revelation of the heart of God, of the heart of our Father. And this just wrecked me when I came across it. I mean, I couldn't get past it. I just could not turn the page.
Yes.
And I'll just read briefly. The Lord God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. Genesis 3:21. Coverings of skin. Some theologians think that behind that act lies the first occasion of animal sacrifice, and that is almost certain. In the ancient world, a sacrifice was the seal of a promise. In fact, the Hebrew word for covenant relates to words for cut and eat, linking sacrifices to covenant meals. And God had indeed made promises. Some ancient Jews and some less ancient scholars think that it means humans received a new kind of body, one that decayed, and that is possible. Whatever it was, the garments are a surprise. The word is kohoneth. They were not the crude genital coverings Adam and Eve made for themselves, thus withdrawing from intimacy. They were not the hairy tunics so often depicted. They were regal robes. The word kohoneth does not appear again until it defines Joseph's magnificent tunic in Genesis 37:3. After that, it next describes the priest's sacred garments in Exodus 28:4. They were lovely things, and they were meaningful beyond description. In the ancient world, to give a robe was a gesture of adoption. Elijah thus adopted Elisha. Jacob thus designated Joseph. Even then, Yahweh God did not disown humanity. Even then, in that black moment of despair, he did not withdraw his love.
Wow.
Stunning.
Wow.
It wrecks me. I just have chills because, again, why doesn't everybody know this?
Yeah.
He didn't evict him. He didn't hammer a big pink slip on their door, drive him out with a whip, kick at him in the backside on his way out. And I love the way Blaine describes, Adam. He was a king. He was a priest. He was a prophet.
Yes.
He spoke with God, and God treated him with dignity, and he did not throw a crude sheepskin with bloodstains on it and cover them up. He covered them with the same garment that Joseph was covered in, the coat of many colors. It was royalty. He clothed them in royalty.
Yes.
And if you go further, which really got me, where did I put that? Excuse me, I'll be right with you. Oh yes, this is beautiful. But God's decided that they got to go, and so he said, from eternity past, the second person of the Trinity has appeared like a man in his youth, though not yet a man. He watched them sorrowfully as they came to the wall. Speaking of God watching his creation. And maybe he said, this is Blaine's fantastic imagination, because it would be true to the story for him to do so. Adam, Eve, and they turned. Yahweh's face was faithful and true. Even that in that hour he did not despair. At the right time, he reminded them, the snake crusher will come. He paused. He took one last look in their faces, and he said, go, and go quickly. What hope remains is not behind you. I had to put the book down, dude, because I started crying. I really did. That just chills me.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about that when he said, soon the snake crusher will come. In God's mind, that was soon. Thousands of years later, when Jesus came, basically was God the Father. Philip, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father.
Yeah.
To God, that was soon. So, yeah, and that just kind of stuck with me. So that is I've been reading past that, but I go back to that. I keep it marked and read it every now and then because it's just so beautiful. Actually talked about it in church a couple of weeks ago before we started worship, and kind of hope it lands. That's how we started worship that Sunday, was talking about the Kohoneth, and that God, even in our blackest and darkest moments, that he clothed Adam and Eve in royalty. And that's what he does.
If you think about it, that's a microcosm of everything that Jesus did during his earthly ministry, was to restore the dignity to humanity that was stolen by sin and death and just life outside of Eden. I mean, there was demon possession, there was blindness, there was leprosy, and all this just horrible stuff that Jesus came in contact with. And as you were talking, I thought particularly about the story where the religious ruling class, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, found this woman caught in the act of adultery and kind of tossed her into the middle of the circle with Jesus and said, the law says this woman should be stoned. What do you say? And Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust, and people have surmised that maybe he was writing out their sins for which they should have been stoned. And then he responded with, let whoever is without sin throw the first stone. But you can kind of look at that as Jesus was responding to the cruelty of religion and evil and wickedness by saying, I don't condemn you either. Go and sin no more. He restored her humanity to her. And that's something through our journey as we're continuing to unpack the revelation of what it means for God to restore Eden, is humanity is not the bottom of the food chain, the bottom of the totem pole. Like, we use this excuse of I'm only human. When we make a mistake, I'm only human. God has a much, much different picture of humanity than that. We were created in the image of God, not fingers and toes and, that, what it means to be created in the image of God. And Tim Mackey and John Collins over at the Bible Project did a really great job of explaining this, that to be created in the image of God means we were meant to rule like him. We were in his function of ruling. So one of the reasons that the devil rebelled against, that Lucifer rebelled against God, is he didn't want to see his place usurped by humanity, that we were these dirt creatures, but we were created to rule alongside God over the entire cosmos. And it's such an amazing and mind-blowing view of humanity that we kind of short circuit and start to back away from that, because we can't grasp the glory that we were made for. And Blaine does a fantastic job of drawing out from the language just how much dignity God imbues humanity with. Even in the midst of our sin and our rebellion, the greatest hope is not behind us. That's just that, as I start to unpack that little section that you read there, those are some of the things that I'm thinking as God is restoring humanity to its rightful place.
Yeah, I know this morning during my devotion and when I was praying, his determination, God's determination is obsessive. It's relentless.
Yeah.
And that, he, and of what he's going to do. It's not he's trying to do, he's going to do. He accomplished it when Jesus said it is finished. And so, and as I was praying this morning, I was praying along those lines, that I want to be like that. I want to be relentless and just almost obsessively determined to move in that direction, to move with him. And, proximity has been, my word of the last few months is that proximity, is being close and always being aware of my proximity to him.
Yeah.
Where he is and where I am, and staying in, just the littlest things, even just flipping through channels sometimes, and I'll go, nope, I can't, because it's just something, that it starts to widen, and I don't like having to, I can go back anytime I want, but why would I want to leave to begin with? I spent so much of my life like that. And I think so many of us do. And that's where the frustration and the fog and the disappointment in ourselves. And then it's easy to begin to make excuses. And then it's easier to begin to indict him. Right. And that it's his fault. And he is not like that at all.
No, he's not.
Not at all. He's he's kinder than the kindest people we've ever met. I think the kindest people that we've met personally in our lives, and yours and whoever's listening, is just a foggy reflection of the depth and the width and the length and the height of his kindness.
Yeah.
And it's just you can't even stand it. I know.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
So kind of maybe we can move on from that.
Yes.
There's another section. So in between each of the chapters in Blaine's book, each one of these chapters based on a kingly figure from the Old Testament as we're leading up to Jesus, he does a chorus. So between Adam and Abraham, there's a section, the chorus from Adam to Abraham. And one of the things that Blaine writes in here, it's on page 47 of the book. He said, the enemy has always worked to remake humanity in its own image, an image of ancient jealousy and ravenous pride. This is the method: false stories, false practices, and false rituals. The stories confuse humanity, the practices compound the confusion, but the rituals, these promote false incarnation. And I think that's the tide that God is working against, are these false stories and these false images. And really the process of us pushing further into the renewal of all things and into what it means to be walking, talking pieces of new creation along with Jesus right now, is we are dismantling and deconstructing those false images and those false stories and reclaiming who God created us to be. And that's another way that we can look at Jesus, is he is the ideal. he is what humanity was always supposed to be,
There you
but
go.
we had to leave the garden, and so he came to restore us. And that just gets right back to the core of the gospel message that we all agree with, is that Jesus is the way back to the Father. He's not, the Bible doesn't claim he's the only way to heaven. He's the only way back to the Father. And so just I underline that just because it's a good level set for me of where am I every day, kind of in
Mm,
keeping with your idea of proximity. Is you're absolutely right. Is where am I in
that's good.
relation to the Father? Am I rooted in this false story? This whose image am I embodying today? Is it the image of the enemy who accuses God and blames God and makes
Right.
him the source of all my problems, or am I
Right.
returning back to his heart? So,
That's good.
so
I love his depiction of Abram, because to be
yeah,
honest with you, I always, I mean, since I've been reading the Bible, which is a long time, um, there's a big difference between reading and studying.
yes,
And again, it comes back to that because, it's when I was younger, before I started actually writing books, I read everything I could get my hands on. I was constantly reading. I could read 2 or 3 books at a time.
oh wow,
Yeah, I've been one of those readers. And
okay,
so, um, uh, to further my thought, and so I hope that helps describe or explain what my point is, that the more that you read it over and over without that um, intricate and, getting below the surface, things, the shine starts to come off. And Abraham became this, this gentle elderly guy, and with some
right.
sheep and his wife and a family. And, they were on this really, really long camping trip, and, yeah, and, living in the wilderness was really like a wilderness. I mean, they had animals, they had food, they had cool tents, and, his, Lot got in trouble, so he went and rescued him, and it becomes almost fairy tale-ish. And maybe that's just me. I'm just, opening my soul here, I guess. And then I started reading this, and uh, gosh, Blaine's description of Abram, dude.
Yeah. He
Yeah.
was not a man to be trifled with.
Oh no, he did not suffer fools graciously. I mean, he was like, you know, he was and he made Navy SEALs look, like Boy Scouts. I mean,
Right.
this guy, he was not one to be trifled with. And
Mm,
I love his description here. When they take off, when he finds out Lot's been taken
yeah.
and the family, I mean, he's the tunnel vision. And
Yeah.
they take off, and he pushes his arm. What has it got? Like 318 guys?
318 men. Yep.
Yeah, 318 men. And I bet every single one of those guys was just as uh, ruthless and efficient and ferocious as Abram.
Yes.
Again, yeah. Um, and he says, but Abram was no tenderfoot. He was smart as a raven, and he knew war.
Hmm.
His 318 men were tested fighters, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. I don't know if I'm pronouncing those correct. Who'd come were ferocious. Abram knew if you have to fight a superior force, you do it at night. When it retreats, you dog it like bad luck. Oh, I love that, man.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I completely have this. It just obliterated my,
Yes.
imagination of what Abram was. This dusty old grandpa that sat on the porch. And, yeah, and
Yeah.
dude, I mean, I just see him ripped.
Right.
Just
Yeah. And I love to kind of round that out. The same chapter here on Abram. It says Ephraim described Abram as a mighty prince, and he must have been. Abram converses with Pharaoh and the Philistine king
oh yes,
Ahimelech. Not many people could stand on their own feet before such kings, so it's clear that Abram was a known entity of no small power. Also, Abram maintained a private army. It was skilled and renowned enough that the solitary refuge of Sodom sought out Abram instead of the nearby kings who could have intervened. Also, Abram clearly had good relationships with many surrounding cities and tribal chieftains. The king of Sodom deferred to Abram's authority, and so the picture is one of a great nomadic chieftain, canny in battle, and a capable politician. Whatever Abram learned on the outskirts of Ur, he did not forget it.
I know. Yeah, he put some serious work into this at the beginning of that on page 51 in the Cliff Notes, I guess. For those interested in how scholars figure this out, the main clues that help a person date the patriarchs are the customs that characterize their lives. While there are several dating systems in the Bible, these do not always agree. Not even the genealogies are complete. Instead, researchers look for social clues. For example, in the 1920s, archaeologists found some texts called the Nuzi tablets near the Tigris River in modern-day Iraq. These hailed from the early 2nd millennium BC and detailed customs that may relate to Abraham's story. In particular, the giving of a slave or servant to produce an heir when no heir comes. So there is so much history. And I heard a long time ago, and I've often quoted to other people when, you always run into people, unfortunately, that say, the Bible is just a big fairy tale. It's not true. And it is the most authenticated piece of literature on the planet.
Yes. By orders of magnitude.
Yes. Yeah. You could destroy a third of the documents that supported it would still stand on its own. Whereas the writings of Plato and Socrates,
I know what you did there.
Yeah. Socrates. If you destroyed theirs, they would be gone forever. Where the Bible just continually, year after year, decade after decade, they completely find more and more proof, and whether it's archaeological or historical or just whatever they find, it just continually supports and confirms the story of the Bible. So that just fascinates me that he got into the weeds on that. I mean, we're talking like the thick weeds. And I love it. It brings a broader perspective for me, and that just fascinates me. The Bible is already alive. It lives and breathes, sharper than a two-edged sword, able to divide between bone and marrow and soul and spirit. But this cuts to the quick. It gets deep, and it brings a fearful respect for me.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
It brings a fearful respect in me that I find it difficult to put to words, or it makes me sit back and go, whoa, whoa. And I love it.
Yeah. And when you really start to dive into the culture and the history that the Bible was written in, it gives you an appreciation for the sophistication of their worldview and the genius of those writers. I mean, we know it was written, as Peter said this, that no prophet ever wrote of his own accord, but he wrote as he was carried along by the Holy Spirit. So there's that. But also the people that put the Bible together were, in the words of Tim Mackey, serious like Bible nerds. They studied and they knew their languages and they knew their culture, and they crafted word pictures and stories specifically to communicate certain ideas. It wasn't just a bunch of hillbillies out wandering around in the desert of the Middle East, scratching down, what they had for dinner that day. It was, highly, highly sophisticated people. So I think there's a sense of like maybe arrogance about our culture and our time that we think because of the progress of learning and education and technology, maybe we are somehow smarter or more advanced, but that's absolutely not the case. That's my kind of takeaway from as you and I are reading things like this and all the stuff that is put out by the Bible Project, like highly, highly intelligent, sophisticated people.
That's brilliant people. I know. And it's a little unsettling that you turn on social media and you have preachers and teachers and denominations fighting over, different Bible translations as opposed to getting into the meat of
Yeah.
like things like this, as like King James, NIV, you know.
Right. Yeah. I'm thinking too about I forget the address in Proverbs, but it says it's the glory of God to conceal a matter, and it's the glory of kings to uncover them. And
Wow.
I think that's the purpose of biblical scholarship is God has kind of hidden these Easter eggs all around creation and in Scripture. And I think, like, let me go back to an experience that I had earlier this year. Our great niece came over to our house for Easter, and she was about 2.5 years old at the time. Absolutely adorable. And I had a basket of a dozen or so Easter eggs, and I went and hid them around the yard, and then I walked with her and kind of helped her discover them. And it was one of the most enjoyable, beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. And as soon as she found all 12, she wanted me to hide them again so we could go find them again. And it was just a great way to spend time together. I must have hidden and found those same 12 eggs 7 times that day. But I think that's what God does with us is he hides these things around, and he takes so much pleasure in watching us
Wow.
find them and discover them as he leads us by the hand and says, "Hey, check this out." And that's what we get with this book
Yeah.
is God taking us by the hand and saying, "Look how cool this is." And we just continue to get this bigger and bigger picture of God and so much more appreciation for his heart for us. It's something that's never going to run dry. That is a well that will never run dry.
Yeah, you're right. It is sobering, but it's in a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to describe. To completely open it up, it's like I'm reading the Bible again for the very first time. Like
Yes.
I'll never look at it the same again when I start to read these stories.
Yeah.
And yeah, to my shame, I realized that as I started to get into this, that I did a lot of topical reading. I mean, I do look for things, and God is always faithful to show, I guess to meet you where you are, to whatever
Yeah.
depth you are, He'll, it's alive, obviously, but it's in the deep places, in those deep studies when that Blaine did. I mean, good for him. Kudos, man. I mean,
Yeah.
he got out the pickaxe and the shovel and spent years. And I think this will be one of those books that you're right. It needs to be required reading. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
absolutely beautiful.
It's good. I'd like to do another episode, like kind of a follow on, just as we
Oh,
continue to
yeah.
dive further into the book. I'm partway into King David now, and then after that comes Josiah, and then on to Jesus finally. But like you said earlier, this will absolutely be a book that I go back and
Oh, yeah.
read for a second time and a third time. So I would love to continue to dive into this together and do a part two, whether it's our next episode or, we take some more weeks and continue to uh, lovingly work our way through this wonderful piece of literature. But yeah,
Yes.
come back and do a part two.
I know. And you're right. I think we should, maybe even a part 7.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. When, the little things that he brought out too, the little things that I, I've never caught, but when he calls, oh gosh, when he's talking about, here I am, the phrase here I am is a single word, Hinneh, it means behold.
Mm.
And,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. And, which can be, at your service. And
Yes.
yeah, and it just was stunning to me. In Exodus 3, God calls to Moses, and Moses says, "Here I am." 1 Samuel 3, God calls to Samuel, and Samuel says, "Here I am." And Isaiah 6, the prophet himself stands in the council of God, and here's the question: "Whom shall I send?" Isaiah responds, "Here I am." So it's a remarkable thing for Abraham to say, God has been looking for this kind of partnership from the beginning. But remember when God called to Adam, Adam said no such thing.
Yeah.
And that broke my heart. But they all responded that same way, at your service, at
Yes.
your service. And it's one of those convicting things,
Yeah. Oh,
So
I remember texting you and Preston and Joey about that when I read that part, and I wish now I could pull it up quickly, but I know I can't. But yeah, it was just this idea of whatever you have to say, I'm in for it. Like, I'm all in. I don't even know what you're going to ask me to do,
I
but
remember
here I
that.
am.
I
That's,
remember that.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
What a great response. And that comes from walking with God and just knowing Him and knowing
Right.
that He's trustworthy and He's good and He's kind. And yeah, He may call us to some hard things, but He's not calling us to go by ourselves. He's never left us alone. Like, going back to what he might have said, in Blaine's fantastic imagination, what he might have said to Adam as he was walking out of the garden is,
Yeah.
the best hopeful things are ahead of you,
Yeah, they're not behind you. I
not
know.
behind you.
Soon the snake crusher will come.
Oh, yes.
I know. Yeah.
Dude, when we get to Jesus, this is just going to be, we're going to have to talk every single day. And
I think so. This is so good. Well, you can see how I mark my book.
Yeah.
Post-it notes.
Yeah. I've got
It's good.
lots and lots of underlines.
I know. And the deeper I go, all I can think of, because thank you. You bought this for me. And thank you very much. You're very kind, very generous.
Happy to
And
do
so
it.
as I'm reading this, I'm thinking of all the people like, man, who, this pastor, he might like it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, cool. It's very good.
Well, thank you everybody for going with us on this. There will be a part 2, and yeah, like Rick said, maybe we'll get to a part 6 or 7. But just such an honor to be here with you. I love our conversations here, and I hope that something we said landed with
Definitely.
you. If you want to reach out to us, you can do so at info@thecosmiccarwash.com. You can leave comments in the chat or in the video here. You and I both are on the YouVersion Bible app, where we do daily devotions now with a group of dozens. I think it's
you could almost call it a small church.
Yeah. It's bigger than some churches I've been to. A little.
It's kind of cool. It's grown. You and I started this over 5 years ago, faithfully every day.
Yep.
Yeah, so we would encourage you to join us if you want to. And there's no set time. It's not a Zoom. It's just a daily devotional. And so a lot of us will comment and some pray, in the comment spaces, and some just come and read and move on with the rest of their day. But you're always welcome, whether you do it in the morning, during lunch, or right before you go to bed.
Yeah.
So we'd love to have you. Look us up on YouVersion or reach out to us here, and we'll point you in the right direction and get you plugged in. And we have people joining us that we've never met. Yep. And, Paul's in Michigan. I'm in Southside Virginia. So people are kind of spread out. Jeff is, where's Jeff?
Oklahoma, I think.
Oh, yeah, Oklahoma. So, yeah, wherever you are, we'd love to have you. And we can't leave without saying what we always say.
Yes. God is not mad at you.
Amen. That's so cool.
All right. Thank you, my friend.
Love y'all.
See you very soon. Love y'all.